Thank you so much, and thank you for welcoming us to your country and to your conference. And I wanted to start by congratulating the organizing committee and all of you here for this 4th annual conference. It's quite an accomplishment to establish and maintain this kind of momentum and enthusiasm for family planning, and wanted to recognize all of your efforts in that regard. And again, thank you for including FP 2020 as a partner in this process. It's our honor to be here with you today. And as Prof mentioned, we have just released our 4th annual report. It's our 4th report since the 2012 London Summit on Family Planning, when Nigeria joined many of the countries around the world to proclaim that family planning was a key development intervention, and that your country and through all of your partnerships are committed to achieving goals so that more women and girls in Nigeria can use contraception as a life-saving commodity, as a way of empowering their control over their own lives and critical decisions. And we're very happy to have built a very strong partnership with Nigeria colleagues since that time. Very proud to present the outcomes today of our 4th annual report, which is Momentum at the Midpoint. If I can have the first slide, please. So in this report, you'll find a range of information. We report on 17 core indicators on an annual basis for each of the 69 countries that FP 2020 focuses on. And again, Nigeria is one of those countries. So with this slide, you'll see sort of a high-level overview of the impact of the FP 2020 partnership and of the work of the family planning community that's been working on this issue for over 50 years. So we're very proud to say that for the first time in history, in 2016, there were 300 million women and girls in the 69 poorest countries of the world who are now able to use contraception. This is an incredible accomplishment, and again, it's one that's taken decades to achieve. It also demonstrates that there's important acceleration in the family planning community. It took 18 years to empower the community so that 100 million women and girls could go to 200 million women and girls using contraception. Going from 200 million to 300 million took 13 years. So there's an incredible acceleration within that, and an understanding of all the potential that family planning can bring to individual lives, to communities, and to countries. And you see that in some of the impact that we have here in terms of the number of abortions, unsafe abortions that were averted, the number of unintended pregnancies that were averted, and importantly, the number of maternal deaths that were averted because of family planning access and use. Within the report as well, you'll see that there's important growth within some key sectors, including in East and Southern Africa, where for the first time, 30% of women and girls are able to choose to use modern forms of contraception. And importantly as well, in West Africa, which is the area of the world that's been farthest behind in terms of a range of development goals, but critically in terms of maternal mortality and family planning use, that through the Ouagadougou Partnership, the 9 countries that comprise the Francophone West Africa Partnership have made incredible progress. They predated FP 2020 by a year, and they had set themselves a goal from 2011 to 2015 to reaching an additional 1 million girls. Well, they exceeded that goal last December, so now they've more than doubled that goal and are now hoping to reach between 2016 and 2020 an additional 2.2 million women and girls. So we're learning a lot through these processes, we're learning from one another, and there has been acceleration even for those areas that are reaching women that are the hardest to reach in many of the ways that you're all challenged here with as well in Nigeria, where I think you're operating in one of the most complex environments in the world. So I wanted to take a moment to talk about the FP 2020 partnership because many of our core partners are here in the room today. So the way that FP 2020 is working with countries is that for every country that makes a commitment, and currently there are 38 commitment countries out of the 69 focus countries, we ask the government to designate a focal point. And then we also ask donors to designate 2 focal points. And then we work with that team to connect with technical resource teams at the country level as well to ensure that the FP 2020 partnership is working to support your priorities and those key interventions that are showing the most promise for accelerating access to use in your country. So the way we've been doing that is that now every year we are hosting focal point conferences where we're pulling the focal points together now on a regional basis. Most recently in April, we had the Anglophone Africa Focal Point Workshop in Uganda, and there created an incredible opportunity for South-South learning, recognizing that many of countries are working on the same issues together. We also then developed understandings about what the partnership would do to support countries, including Nigeria, to reach your priority objectives. And those plans are a way that we're aligning the global community behind Nigeria's objectives. And you see here on this slide that many of the countries are working to reach the same issues and address the same challenges. So I think these South-South moments of learning from one another are critical to being able to address them and to make progress. So on the next slide, we wanted to show you that in addition to launching our annual report this year, we've also reworked our country-specific pages on the FP 2020 website because we wanted these to be more useful to you as a resource for information. So for each of the 69 countries, you'll find very specific information. And for those who have made an FP 2020 commitment, you'll see the country's commitment, you'll see their annual report of progress against that commitment. You'll also see annual data sheets that pull from the data of partners like PMA 2020 and Track 20 to show country progress against the 17 core indicators. And by comparing them from country to country, you can also learn a lot about where the potential is for growth, and again, what other countries are doing that might help shape some of your key interventions. You'll also find, importantly, information on things like the Global Finance Facility investment cases and the project implementation documents where those are available. And I point you to those specifically because Nigeria has a key opportunity now in shaping your investment case and your project documents. And there's a lot to learn from in terms of what other countries have done there as well. So we want these pages to be a resource to all of you. They're open for you to post information as well, reports that you have that you want to share with colleagues and share with the global community. So please know that this is intended to be a resource and sort of a vibrant conversation, but something for you to use where you can be sure that you can access that annual data at least as it becomes available. Wanted to also talk about rights and empowerment as a critical area for FP 2020. In setting the goal of reaching an additional 120 million women and girls, it's critical that we do this, that as we're growing these programs, we do so in a way that considers the needs of individual women and girls as we're growing these programs in a sustainable way. We need high quality programs, and we need to learn about what that means. So there's a community of practice within FP 2020 now that's looking at what it means to build a program from a rights perspective, and then to be able to measure the impact of rights-based programmings so that we can empower you all as advocates with the evidence about what this impact is to ensure that as we grow the community and the sector that we're doing so in a way for broader impact in the long term, and again to make sure that we're considering the rights and the perspectives of the individual women and girls within that context. Next slide, please. And I'm very happy to hear that many from the youth pre-conference yesterday are here with us today. I was pleased to be invited to participate in that meeting, and as always, they're incredibly energizing convenings of young people, recognizing that what we're working on now is both meeting their immediate needs and helping to build their future. So at FP 2020, we're committed to working with youth as well and to making sure that they are included in the decision-making processes and that our efforts are youth-centered and not just youth-focused. So we're doing that in a few ways. One is to ensure that youth are at the table at the highest levels. And with that, last year we created a designated youth seat on the FP 2020 reference group. And the reference group is basically our board, and it's comprised of 18 global leaders in family planning, including 6 country representatives. And Minister Adewale is on the reference group as well. And in our last meeting last week, he was represented by Dr. Adebiye at our meeting in Tanzania. Our youth seat is also filled by a Nigerian, a young woman named Margaret Balaji, who is connected to global networks of young people. So she's bringing the perspective of Nigerian youth, but also global youth into that conversation to make sure that she has an opportunity to challenge and to push for youth perspectives in that conversation. We're also looking to ensure that the advocacy work of countries within the partnership structures present youth opportunities as well, so that that's not lost. And we're working to cultivate acceptance of evidence-based programs and policies that are shown to have the most impact for young people. And that's an ongoing process of making sure that the right evidence is in the right hands so that we can transition away from some programs that maybe have been invested in for a long time but aren't having the highest impact as some other programs. So this is an ongoing process again in partnership with some of the technical experts, including WHO, who've been doing a lot to pull together the lessons that have been learned over the last decades about what's most effective for reaching young people. Next slide. I wanted to talk a bit about the Sustainable Development Goals, because I think that we have a unique opportunity now as a family planning community to make sure that we're both connecting to other partners in the development space, but also to making those critical arguments for why family planning is so important to reaching all of the development goals. And in thinking about the SDGs, I think we have a unique opportunity as well with this concept of universality, and that we're all in this together. The MDGs focused on alleviating poverty in the world's poorest countries, and I think laid the critical foundation for where we are now in terms of talking about sustainability. But every country is committed to the SDGs, and every country is linked in that. And for me, I think that that's a powerful connection, both philosophically and emotionally, to how all of our development is linked together. I have a 16-year-old daughter, and I was telling the youth network yesterday that I very much see her future tied to the future of Nigerian youth, and that we're all in this together, and how we shape our world together will have an impact on young people everywhere. As an older person, I didn't grow up connected to the world. I grew up connected to the people in my neighborhood and maybe my family who were living in different places in the United States. But that's not the worldview of young people now. And so I think the SDGs provide a framework that will provide for their growth in a way that brings us all together in new alignment and new potential. And I hope that we'll be able to reach out to other sectors to take advantage of this unique opportunity. So next slide, please. So now I wanted to take a moment to talk about the measurement overall and what we've seen at this point at the midpoint of FP 2020. So the next slide shows our overall progress, and I'll take a moment to explain this slide because it's a bit dense. So the top line shows the arc of progress that will take us from 2012 toward 2020, and that's the goal of reaching 120 million women and girls. The bottom line is the trajectory that we saw in 2012 if we had done nothing different. And then the line in between that's above the bottom line by about 25% is the current trajectory of progress that we're on. So what we've seen is that by reaching 300 million women and girls at this point in time, we're 25% ahead of where we would have been had we done nothing different in 2012. But that means we're significantly behind where we had hoped to be. This arc was always intended to go a little bit slower at the beginning, and then to make up the pace over in the latter years, recognizing that we had a lot to learn and that we needed to build the data foundation. We're now able to see through the data, and you'll see this over the course of the next 3 days, I think, a lot more richness, a lot more understanding of where we're having impact and where those high impact practices are. And just in the reference group last week and looking at that data, a lot of the leadership were agreeing that had we had the data in 2012 that we have now, we probably would have been able to go a lot faster. But now we have it. Now we know a lot more about what's promising and where we can have the most impact. And so the challenge for all of us is to use that data to interrogate our programs and our processes to make sure that we're moving forward in a way that's going to have the highest impact. Next slide, please. So this slide we show just to put a little bit of context in terms of where we expect to see growth and where the numbers of users are residing within the world. So today there are an estimated 894 million women who are aged 15 to 49 in the FP 2020 countries. That's 61 million more than there were in 2012. So a closer examination of what we call our core indicator 1 shows that there are more than half of the 30 million additional users are in South Asia, 16 million, which is not surprising given that that's where the world's most populated countries are. Many of the largest FP 2020 countries are seeing growth in the total number of contraceptive users as their populations grow. In Nigeria, for example, the population of women of reproductive age grows each year by more than 1 million. And family planning programs must serve a greater number of clients just to keep pace with population growth, which is, of course, your country's MCPR, and to keep that constant. In several other countries, particularly in Asia and Latin America, contraceptive use is already relatively high, and so growth in MCPR has been slower. Other regions have seen more additional users added due to growth in their modern contraceptive prevalence rate. And since 2012, focus countries in Africa have added 13 million additional users, or 44% of the total additional users across all FP 2020 focus countries, despite the fact that these countries are representing only 27% of the total number of women of reproductive age. So looking forward, Africa is likely to continue to contribute a disproportionate number of additional users as both the population of women of reproductive age grows and as MCPR increases. Next slide, please. At the FP 2020 summit in 2012, Nigeria set a goal of reaching 36% MCPR and traditional methods and expanding traditional methods among married women. This could convert roughly to 21% MCPR among all women in 2012. So I'll take a moment to explain that a little better. At FP 2020, we track for all women. A lot of countries like Nigeria make a commitment for married women. So when you look at the data, you need to make sure that you're looking, that you know that you're looking at either the married women data or the all women data. So Nigeria's goal of 36% for married women translates into 21% for all women. In 2016, Nigeria's estimated all women MCPR was 14%, growing at 0.7% per annum since 2012. And this slower progress means that, of course, you're not on track to reach that goal, and that there will have to be concerted work done in order to address those barriers that are in the way of accelerating that progress. The method mix in Nigeria as well is dominated by short-term methods. About 87% of users are using short-term methods. And the use of long-acting reversible contraception remains very limited, so there's an opportunity for growth within that as well. So within the National Strategic Health Development Plan for 2016 to 2020, Nigeria is taking the opportunity, I believe, to recalibrate and extend its goal to 2020. The Ministry of Health's Data Consensus Workshop in August informs an adjustment of this goal, and so we look forward to seeing what that will be from you going forward. Next slide, please. So this slide is one that we use to help look at the opportunity for investing in demand-side interventions as a way of growing the program. So you can see here that the curve shows the maximum MCPR that's been seen for different desired family size. As you can see here, typically when desired family size is high, contraceptive use is low. The dots represent the regions of Nigeria, and you can see that if a dot is close to the curve, it's unlikely that there will be much opportunity there for growth in contraceptive use without further decline in lowering the number of ideal children within a family size. So it helps you look at where the potential is that demand will have on whether you can grow your program within this context. Next slide. So reaching unmarried women remains key. And recent growth in your contraceptive prevalence rate has been driven by contraceptive use among unmarried women. Expanding use among unmarried sexually active women aged 15 to 24 should be a priority. At the moment, most unmarried women obtain contraception from a pharmacy, almost 69%, or from a friend, almost 20%. So without direct programs that are reaching the needs of young people, there's an impediment there to making sure that they're getting the services that can work best for them and provide them the longest term support and protection, including through long-acting methods. And the WHO has recently released the medical eligibility criteria that shows the potential for use for young women of long-acting contraception. And I encourage you to look at that information and to see how that can fit with Nigeria's programs. Next slide. Now I'd like to shift a bit and talk about mobilizing resources and look at the financing landscape for family planning, as it's I think going to be a critical factor in your ability to grow Nigeria's program as well. So at FP 2020, we work with the Kaiser Family Foundation to do analysis on donor disbursements for family planning. And this slide represents their work. And in it you see that donors have dispersed $1.3 billion US dollars in 2015 for family planning activities. And this is slightly below the 2014 disbursement. Most of this is because of changes in fluctuation rate against the dollar in terms of exchange rate, but also because a few donors, a few elevated and a few reduced, and then there were fluctuation rates, so it came out as a total aggregate of 1.3 billion. In currency of origin, 5 donors, including Denmark, France, Germany, the Netherlands, and Sweden, increased their funding. 2 donors, the United States and Canada, remained flat, and 3 donors, Australia, Norway, and the UK, declined. Next slide. The US remained the largest bilateral donor, accounting for almost half of the total family planning, bilateral family planning in 2015. The UK was the second largest, accounting for 1/5 of all bilateral funding, followed by the Netherlands, France, and Sweden. And this is only bilateral assistance. If you were to combine foundation assistance and put it into this graph as well, they would be the 4th. And if you were then to add the US, the UK, the Netherlands, and the foundations, that would account for approximately 90% of all sort of bilateral or donor assistance for family planning programs. And not shown here is that UNFPA spent about $341 million, or about 42% of their funding for family planning programs. But the reality is that these disbursements are not likely to get larger over time, and for countries who are looking to grow their programs, domestic resources are going to have to be raised in order to meet that gap between donor disbursements and the growth of programs going forward. Next slide, please. So this is just to give a quick segue into the next slide, actually, which I want to be sure that you have a chance to see because it shows what the potential financial implications are for growing programs. Here, the top line is a forecasting estimate of what the financial resources are that we'll need to grow the family planning sector and pay for the use for the additional 90 million women and girls that get us to the FP 2020 goal. The bottom line is the current trajectory. At the current moment, these funds aren't available for the family planning sector. As a group, donors, UN, and country finances, we're going to have to be able to raise these funds in order to grow our sector toward everyone's goals for FP 2020. Next slide, please. So I want to end with promising areas for investment in Nigeria that come out through the data, because we think it's important that we look at improving programming and coordinating support for technical assistance and the development of your state-level CIPs. Currently 5 states have state-level CIPs and 13 additional CIPs are being developed, and these have been shown to be highly useful and helpful documents in terms of focusing efforts on interventions that can have the highest impact, and so we encourage that continued development here in Nigeria. Mobilizing resources will remain a critical opportunity, and this group has an opportunity to really have an influence over your country's global financing facility investment case, and I encourage you to use the data and evidence to push for family planning explicit expenditures within your GFF investment case, including on demand generation and the use of long-acting reversible methods. We also think that there's an opportunity for shaping markets and addressing supply chain interventions. Again, using all of the data in order to inform your advocacy and your program objectives. And finally, to build a broad-based movement for high-level support to continue that the government at the highest level and all of your surrogates are pushing for family planning as a key intervention to meeting all of your development goals, not having family planning be seen as a silo, but as really a force multiplier for development here in Nigeria. And then I'll just end by reminding us all on this last slide that for the 10-year-old girl who's with us today, she'll be the 24-year-old by the time that we reach the Sustainable Development Goals. So in remembering that everything that we do will have an impact both on her future years and the world that we're building for her, to remember the needs of individual women and girls as we're developing these programs. Thank you for your time.